The thing that makes this weapon really unique in 1944 is the fact that it's both semi-automatic and fully automatic. And by semi-automatic, I mean every time you pull the trigger back one pressure, it fires one round. But you can put this thing into full automatic fire, and when you do that thing, when you pull back the trigger, it will continue to fire until the magazine is empty.
A person during World War I thought they were in a new age, a fascinating modern world. All of these would be smashed the battlefields of Europe.
If you think World War I was all trenches and rifles, think again. Behind the mud and chaos, inventors unleashed some of the strangest and most jaw-dropping weapons ever seen on a battlefield. From flaming death machines to devices that make modern warfare look tame, these inventions pushed the limits of imagination and sometimes sanity. Join us as we reveal the 20 most horrible and bizarre World War I weapons you've probably never heard about. 20. Livens Large Gallery Flame Projector. It took 300 Royal Engineers just to haul this monster underground. The Livens Large Gallery Flame Projector was less a weapon and more a buried dragon. Engineers tunneled 50 yards under no man's land, bolted together a 56-foot steel tube filled with thick fuel, and then waited. At 0 hour, a pneumatic ram punched the nozzle through the soil, and a 10-second geyser of burning oil roared 300 feet across the German line. Survivors said the ground itself seemed to breathe fire. Only 5 projectors were built, but the one fired on the Somme in July 1916 cleared an entire sector in minutes. Yet the device was so huge, so slow to emplace, that most lay abandoned once the front moved. In 2010, archaeologists dug up one projector near Mametz and found charred nozzle plates still fused to the pipe, proof of the inferno it unleashed. When a modern replica was tested for television, the flame's pressure shattered nearby windows even before the fuel ignited. Its creators, led by Captain William Livens, saw it as trench warfare's ultimate shock weapon. 19. Le Prieur rockets. While trench lines crisscrossed the soil, the skies held their own duels. French ace pilots strapped slender wooden tubes called Le Prieur rockets to the interplane struts of Nieuport 17 biplanes. Each rocket carried black powder and a steel rod, and ignition came from a small cockpit battery. On 22 April 1916, Lieutenant Yves Le Prieur unleashed a full spread into a German observation balloon near Verdun, watching the hydrogen envelope burst into orange fire. The rockets flew scarcely 100 yards and wobbled badly, so pilots had to dive almost point blank, their propellers inches from canvas gas bags. Still, the sight of a balloon turning into a blazing lantern made the risk worthwhile, and for a few adrenaline-soaked months, these homemade missiles ruled the clouds. Le Prieur's invention gave Allied aviators a weapon before incendiary bullets became reliable, and it pushed aircraft tactics toward ever closer assaults. But every launch was a gamble. Rockets that fizzled clung to the wing, spraying sparks onto varnished fabric. By late 1916, tracer rounds took over, and the Skyfire show ended. Yet the rockets remain a vivid echo that World War I innovation often began with nothing more than wire, wood, and raw nerve. 18. Fléchette darts. Before bombs became standard, pilots reached for a simpler terror, fléchettes. These little steel arrows, barely 5 inches long, were packed by the thousand in wooden boxes and shoved over the cockpit rim. Released from 2,000 feet, they whistled downward, rotating on fins, each one capable of punching straight through a leather helmet and planting itself deep in a man's spine. Early German patrols reported casualties whose wounds looked drilled rather than shot. The French even stamped "drop on the Germans" on some dart heads to make the message literal. Fléchettes weighed almost nothing, so reconnaissance planes could scatter them without losing altitude. Accuracy did not matter. The point was psychological. A silent rain of needles turned a quiet morning into sudden panic, leaving trench roofs bristling like porcupines. Infantry answered by stringing chicken wire above dugouts, hoping to tangle the darts before they picked up lethal speed. Soon heavier ordnance crowded the fragile craft, and the era of the dart was over. 17. Paris gun. Then came the thunder that seemed to ignore distance entirely. In March 1918, Parisians heard a bang so faint that many thought it was a boiler explosion, yet a shell landed on the Rue de Rivoli moments later. The culprit was the German Paris gun, a railway artillery piece 9 stories long that hurled 94-kilogram shells, almost 130 kilometers. Each round climbed into the stratosphere, the first man-made object to touch the edge of space, then screamed back to Earth at supersonic speed. Because flight time exceeded 3 minutes, gunners had to account for Earth's rotation. Every shot required new calculations and freshly machined shells with progressively wider driving bands to match bore erosion. Firing cracked the liner so badly that after 65 rounds, the barrel had to be replaced. Yet the psychological impact was priceless to German command. Residents fled underground, convinced an entire battery lurked just outside the city. Only about 250 shells were fired, killing fewer than 200 people, but the notion that nowhere was safe echoed long after the gun was dismantled. Terror, it turned out, could be delivered by mathematics alone. 16. K-Wagen Super Heavy Tank. Artillery could shatter a trench, but Germany also dreamed of rolling fortresses. Enter the Großkampfwagen, better known as the K-Wagen. Think of a land ship longer than a blue whale skeleton and weighing 120 tons, too large for any bridge on the Western Front. Designers split the monster into railcar sections to be bolted together just behind the line, where the 27-man crew crowded inside steel walls 30 millimeters thick. 4 77mm fortress guns poked from sponsons, while 7 MG-08 machine guns guarded every blind angle. 2 Daimler V6 engines rumbled in the center, delivering a crawling 7.5 kilometers per hour. But the vehicle was intended to crush wire and strongpoints rather than chase anything. Electrical lights inside flashed orders because the drivers had no forward view. Enemy shells could pound the hull all day without cracking it. But the war ended before the first 2 prototypes left their sheds. Both were later cut apart under Allied supervision, so the only surviving images are grainy factory photos and blueprint fragments. 15. Big Bertha 42-centimeter howitzer. If the K-Wagen promised rolling shock, Big Bertha delivered a shattering impact from afar. Krupp's 42-centimeter Emgeräte siege howitzer squatted like a mechanical toad, barrel jutting 12 calibers long, each shell a 900-kilogram concrete-breaking giant. Rail crews spent hours assembling Bertha's sections, then watched as the breach belched a crimson flash that could be seen through morning fog. At Liège in August 1914, 2 guns destroyed Forts Pontis and Lançon in days, detonating magazines deep underground and sending turret blocks cartwheeling like toys. Rate of fire was only 8 rounds per hour, but one hit usually ended resistance. French papers borrowed the nickname Grosse Bertha, linking the weapon to heiress Bertha Krupp, and the label stuck. Bertha's shock value outran her strategic use. Once concrete forts fell, mobile warfare resumed, and the 43-ton chassis proved slow to redeploy. Later models experimented with lighter barrels, yet ammunition failures cracked tubes and crews grew scarce. By 1918, only scattered pieces remained operational, overshadowed by longer-range railway cannon like the Paris gun. But Bertha's silhouette lingers in every discussion of super-heavy artillery. When the ground trembled under her recoil, soldiers said geology itself had joined the fight. 14. Pedersen device. Trench fighting was often decided at spitting distance, where bolt-action rifles felt painfully slow. American designer John Pedersen offered a secret fix, a drop-in device that replaced the Springfield M1903's bolt with a tiny blowback pistol receiver. In 15 seconds, a doughboy transformed his long rifle into a shoulder-fired mini-machine gun, firing 40-round magazines of .3018 pistol ammunition as fast as he could squeeze the trigger. Tests showed experienced marksmen dumping 150 aimed shots in under a minute, 3 times the Springfield's usual rate. The plan called for shipping 100,000 modified rifles and 65 million cartridges to France for the 1919 spring offensive, unleashing storms of lead during every assault. Production hurdles fell in record time. Wooden cases were stamped "Top Secret," and training films were shot under armed guard. Then the armistice arrived and the program became obsolete overnight. Most devices sat in crates until 1931, when the Army chose scrap value over storage fees and ordered nearly every unit destroyed with cutting torches, forever lost. Fewer than 100 survived, turning the Pedersen device into one of the rarest curiosities in firearms history. 13. Mauser Tankgewehr M1918. Armored vehicles demanded an equally fearsome counter, and Germany's answer was the Mauser Tankgewehr M1918, the world's first purpose-built anti-tank rifle. Chambered for a 13.2mm cartridge almost the size of a soda can, the single-shot bolt action weighed 16 kilograms and produced recoil so brutal that manuals told gunners to pad their shoulders with sandbags. Fired from prone, the T-Gewehr could pierce 15 millimeters of armor at 100 meters, enough to cripple a British Mark IV. Two-man teams lugged the rifle forward during 1918 offensives, the loader calling targets while the shooter braced, fired, then worked the massive bolt to eject a smoking brass case as long as his palm. Without a muzzle brake, muzzle blast kicked dust clouds that betrayed position, yet a well-placed shot on a fuel tank often ended the duel anyway. Roughly 16,000 rifles left Mauser's Oberndorf factory before the armistice, and captured examples inspired interwar designs from Solothurn to Boys. Modern anti-materiel rifles trace a direct lineage to this beast, whose skeleton stock and slab-sided receiver resembled farm machinery, but rewrote the rules of armored warfare. To fire one was to trade a bruised shoulder for the power to stop steel in its tracks. 12. Livens gas projector. Captain William Livens was not done after his subterranean flamethrower. His next creation, the Livens projector, looked like a giant stovepipe buried at a shallow angle. Packed with a 30-pound drum of phosgene or burning oil, each 8-inch tube was wired to an electric detonator. Engineers planted hundreds in serried rows under camouflage netting. When the switch closed, black powder charges hurled the drums half a mile, where they burst in foul yellow clouds that seeped through gas masks and drenched parapets with sticky fire. Unlike artillery, projectors were cheap. A battery of 200 cost less than a single howitzer shell, and they could be sighted by a corporal with a compass. Their drawbacks were accuracy and backblast. Crews cleared a safety lane before firing to avoid wayward bombs landing short. During the opening of the Somme, 24,000 drums streaked overhead in 50 seconds, turning German forward trenches into choking chaos. The simple mortar remained standard British chemical delivery until 1918, when mobile launchers took over, yet its brutal efficiency proved that terror could be mass-produced with plumbing supply parts and a car battery. 11. Flaming Onion AA gun. Night-flying pilots had their own bogeyman, the Flaming Onion. They described a string of greenish fireballs rising together, seemingly tied by wire, ready to slice wings in half. The reality was a 5-barreled 37mm Hotchkiss revolving cannon, pressed into an improvised anti-aircraft roll by German crews. Firing flare-laden shells in rapid sequence, the gun produced an optical illusion of glowing beads on a fiery necklace. With a cyclic rate near 250 rounds per minute, it far outstripped single-shot field pieces of the day, and the brilliant tracers allowed gunners to walk bursts through darkness toward lumbering observation craft. American ace Frank Luke met his end under such fire in 1918. Pilots tried corkscrew dives and sudden throttle chops to break the illusion and dodge the ascending chain, but fear lingered every time the first orb blinked upward. Ground troops sometimes cheered the spectacle, unaware that each glowing sphere masked a steel core. Later in the war, improved flak guns replaced the Flaming Onion, yet the nickname survived as shorthand for any vividly traced airburst. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick, inspired by the wild world of forgotten war machines. This image has been making waves online, showing what looks like a massive tracked beast straight out of an alternate history. Some say it's a prototype supertank from World War I. Others believe it's a later-era experimental vehicle designed for psychological warfare. But here's the twist. What exactly is that gaping cannon-like opening on the front? Is it real military engineering, or just a heavily edited piece of military myth-making? What's your take? Let us know in the comments below. 10. Villar-Perosa M 1915. Trench raiders coveted compact firepower, and Italy answered with the Villar-Perosa M 1915, essentially twin machine guns joined at the hip. Each barrel fired 9mm pistol rounds at up to 1,500 shots per minute, so fast that the sound blurred into a buzzing growl. Originally mounted on aircraft, the weapon found its real calling when Arditi assault troops slung it across their chests and stormed Austrian positions. 2 top-loading 25-round magazines ran dry in seconds, but within those seconds a defender might face a storm of 50 bullets. To steady the recoil, operators lay prone behind a small shield or balance the receiver on bipods improvised from shovel handles. Enemies nicknamed it the fart gun, but no one laughed when walls of lead swept trench parapets clean. Captured examples inspired German and Austro-Hungarian experiments and nudged submachine gun concepts toward reality. When the war ended, many units were converted into the OVP 1918 carbine with a shoulder stock, foreshadowing the classic SMG layout. If the Shosha carried automatic fire forward, the Viller Perosa taught armies that a compact bullet hose could be just as truly decisive when seconds mattered. It is the loud ancestor of every modern personal defense weapon. 9. M1917 Knuckle Duster Trench Knife. Automatic guns grabbed headlines, but much of trench combat ended at arm's length, where the US M1917 Knuckle Duster knife ruled. Forged with a triangular stabbing blade and a cast bronze grip shaped into 4 crushing spikes, the weapon combined dagger, brass knuckles, and skull-breaking pommel. Raiding parties slipping across no man's land at night prized silent kills. A single thrust between ribs or an uppercut of bronze spikes could finish a sentry without alerting the line. Designers even milled a steel nut into the pommel so the knife doubled as a hammer for cutting barbed wire pickets. More than 1 million were ordered, though the armistice canceled most contracts. Surviving examples showed deep nicks along the knuckles where metal met helmet rim. French soldiers copied the pattern with improvised nails, while German raiders favored spiked trench clubs, but few close-quarter tools matched the American knife's sinister elegance. 8. VB Rifle Grenade Launcher. Grenades had reach problems until French officers Vivien and Bessières slipped a cup launcher over a standard rifle muzzle. Their VB device weighed little more than a bayonet, yet let an ordinary poilu loft a 490-gram fragmentation bomb nearly 200 meters. Firing used live ball ammunition. The bullet passed through a central tube, striking a primer and detonating the grenade 8 seconds later. Recoil was fierce, so manuals advised resting the butt on the ground and using a wooden firing rack marked for range angles. American expeditionary troops adopted the system wholesale in 1917, eventually producing 20 million grenades. During the Meuse-Argonne advance, whole platoons took turns lobbing saturation salvos over ridges, clearing machine gun nests before rushing onward. The VB's simplicity eclipsed spring catapults and mortar-like sauterelles, proving that a rifle could double as light artillery with a 5-franc attachment. Infantry who mastered the delayed fuse became adept at banking bombs off dugout walls, a deadly game of billiards that left defenders stunned. Though rifle grenades evolved, the core concept persisted into modern underbarrel launchers, and soldiers still feel the VB's lineage whenever a metallic clang rings out ahead of an arcing projectile. 7. Shosha Light Machine Gun. Few weapons are cursed and praised in equal measure like the French Shosha CSRG 1915 light machine gun. Built from pressed steel and bicycle tubing, it weighed 9 kilograms and fed from a crescent-shaped 20-round magazine open on one side to collect trench mud. In clean conditions, it offered infantry their first portable suppressive fire, spitting 8mm level rounds at 240 shots per minute while advancing behind rolling barrages. Colonel Louis Shosha's long recoil design lurched almost half a meter each cycle, barrel assembly sliding inside its shroud, an ungainly dance that gave the gun its reputation for jams. Yet French units credited it with breaking wire and pinning Germans during the Nivelle offensive, and American Marines carried Shosha variants ashore at Belleau Wood months before the bar arrived. The weapon's worst faults lay in rushed US .306 conversions with incorrect chambers. Original 8mm guns, well maintained, could dump magazine after magazine until barrels glowed red. Troops loved its shoulder strap and pistol grip, precursors to modern squad automatics. In many ways, the Shosha bridged the gap between heavy machine guns and true assault rifles, teaching armies that mobility and automatic fire belong together, even if early prototypes rattled like kitchenware. 6. Periscope Rifle. At Gallipoli, the opposing trenches sometimes lay 5 meters apart, making any peek over the parapet a death sentence. Australian builder Sergeant William Beach solved the problem with a saw and a mirror. He cut a Lee Enfield in half, mounted the pieces on a wooden frame, added a periscope aligned with the iron sights, and tied the trigger to a length of cord. Now the shooter could aim and fire from 2 feet below the sandbags, safe every day from Turkish snipers. Colonel Birdwood called the improvised periscope rifle one of the campaign's most important inventions. Beachfront workshops soon produced hundreds, some accurate to 200 meters, each one a bright proof of battlefield ingenuity. Stripped of elegance, they nonetheless allowed daylight suppressive fire, letting Allied troops move during hours previously dominated by sharpshooters. The idea spread to the Western Front, where British engineers refined the mirror mounts and even patented pistol versions. Modern remote vision firing solutions trace conceptual roots to these handmade hybrids of lumber and optics. A restored example still hangs in the Australian War Memorial, wood splintered, mirror clouded, yet the rope trigger remains taut. A quiet salute to soldiers who refuse to offer their heads for target practice. 5. Sawback Bayonet 98/05. Rifles already bristled with blades, but German pioneers wanted a tool that doubled as a saw. Many were issued to engineer units tasked with clearing barbed wire and demolishing wooden obstacles in forward zones. The Seitengewehr 98/05 butcher blade bayonet featured vicious, grim serrations along the spine. Designed for cutting picket stakes and timber, it also left ragged wounds that horrified Allied medics. Propaganda painted the sawback as proof of German brutality and captured soldiers carrying one risked summary execution. In response, many troops ground off the teeth or traded blades with artillerymen. Still, the sawback's utility could not be denied. In shattered forests from Verdun to the Vosges, it cut firing slits, trimmed duckboards, and when necessary thrust cleanly through greatcoats. Weight sat forward, earning the Butcher nickname because it acted like a cleaver in close combat. Production ceased in 1917 under diplomatic pressure, but thousands had already entered the trenches. Collectors can spot untouched examples by intact serrations and unit markings near the crossguard. A single glance at those shark-tooth ridges explains why opponents feared the blade more than bullets. Pain can break morale faster than any lecture on tactics. 4. Sauterelle grenade crossbow. Before reliable mortars arrived, British trenches relied on elastic ingenuity. The French-designed Sauterelle, nicknamed Grasshopper, was a 24-kilogram bomb-throwing crossbow that used twisted rubber bands and a metal arm to lob Mills bombs over 100 meters. Set on a spidery tripod, the device winched back like a medieval siege engine, then sprang upward, sending a grenade in a lazy arc perfect for dropping behind parapets. Captains' logs record entire afternoons spent hurling jammed tin bombs while artillery conserved shells. Although crews needed 2 minutes to reload, the silence allowed surprise attacks without revealing battery positions. Infantry joked that the wobbling flight gave defenders time to write farewell letters, yet casualties mounted whenever a bomb found a dugout roof. By late 1916, the Sauterelle gave way to the lighter Stokes mortar, but for 18 months, this quirky hybrid of slingshot and catapult filled a lethal niche between hand grenades and field guns. Reenactors who build replicas today discover that accurately tensioning the rubber still determines range to the meter, proving how much science can hide inside something that looks like a playground toy. When commanders first saw it, they laughed, until the first grenade cleared the wire and bloomed smoke in an enemy sap. 3. Jam tin grenade. Supply shortages forced Anzac engineers to improvise, and nothing epitomized their creativity like the jam tin grenade. Soldiers collected empty fruit preserve cans, packed an inner can with ammonal, poured ball bearings or scrap metal in the outer gap, and sealed the fuse with wax. Light the friction igniter, give it a healthy toss, and 4 seconds later shards of colonial breakfast ration shredded whatever lay nearby. Some tins even used cigarette fuses for delayed sabotage. Patrols stepping on an apparently harmless tin, hours later faced sudden blasts. During the siege of Lone Pine, Australians lined trench lips with rows of jam pots and rolled them downhill when Turks charged. The design spread so quickly that British manuals printed diagrams alongside official number. 5 Mills bombs, Once industrial grenades caught up, commanders ordered jam pots withdrawn, but veterans kept a few in packs, just in case. Archaeologists still find distorted tin rings across Gallipoli, proof of homemade lethality born from desperate need. Every army museum that displays one quietly shows how war devours factories faster than factories can answer, leaving ingenuity to fill the gap with kitchenware and courage. Improvisation kept defensive lines alive when logistics broke down completely. 2. Trench Club. When bullets jammed and bayonets tangled, raiders reached for brutal simplicity. The Trench Club. Typically a hardwood stick 18 inches long with lead poured into a drilled head, it turned a soldier's arm into a battering ram. Some German versions featured spring-loaded shafts that snapped forward on impact, multiplying force. Others screwed a deactivated Mills bomb onto the tip, hobnails glinting like teeth. Because clubs were silent and seldom broke, night patrols favored them for quick, one-strike encounters in narrow firing bays. Units often crafted their own aftermail call, carving regimental crests or initials into the haft, a grim bit of personalization. British historian Charles Carrington remembered raiders rehearsing swings on sandbags, timing the moment a sentry paused mid-turn so the blow landed behind the ear. Clubs also served psychological warfare. Prisoners shown a blood-darkened mace often surrendered secrets faster than under formal interrogation. Though rarely listed in ordnance tables, thousands were manufactured by divisional carpenters right up to the armistice, proving that even as technology leapt forward, medieval solutions still had a place in modern hand-to-hand war. Battlefields excavated today yield cracked handles and rusted hobnails, daily. 1. Flammenwerfer, M16. The war began with pipe rifles and ended with portable dragons. Germany's Flammenwerfer M16 packed 18 liters of thickened fuel in a cylindrical backpack linked to a steel lance. One soldier carried the tank while a second aimed the nozzle, cracking a valve that sent a roaring jet 30 meters forward, bright as sunrise and laced with burning metal flakes to cling to targets. Flamethrower assaults often started minutes before infantry waves, driving defenders from parapets or down stairwells, leaving machine gun nests empty for advancing stormtroopers. British diaries describe the terrifying hiss that preceded the fire, a sound that froze rifle bolts mid-cycle. Operators were marked men. Enemy snipers prioritized them, and a single bullet through the tank could turn the carrier into a pillar of flame. Even so, demand for the weapon outpaced training capacity after its first use at Verdun in February 1916. By 1918, smaller Wechselapparat models improved range and reliability, but the core horror remained: liquid fire that turned cover into a trap. Modern flamethrowers echo the same principles, though international law now limits their use, acknowledging a truth the M16 made clear: fear can be engineered as surely as steel. Survivors recalled the unique smell of scorched sandbags lingering for hours. Ever heard of any of these weapons before? Let us know which one you knew about, and be sure to subscribe for more historical deep dives.